holds then that we cannot derogate against these norms, Mr. Speaker. Then the question we should ask ourselves, can the amendments that have been proposed in the BBI report pass the test of protecting the basic principles and values of the Constitution? Mr. Speaker, put in another way, is it possible for us to bring constitutional amendments that, Mr. Speaker, contradict the basic norms of the Constitution itself? For example, Mr. Speaker, we've said that in Article 81, that, Mr. Speaker, we must have gender equity, that all institutions of governance, including Senate National Assembly, must have, Mr. Speaker, at least a third of its membership, Mr. Speaker, must come from either gender. But we've come with the BBI report and said, Mr. Speaker, that we are going to amend the Constitution so that in 2032, and I don't know why the women folk who keep talking about here that there are many gains of women in this bill. This BBI report says in 2032, if we will not have achieved a third of women in the National Assembly, a third of women in the county assemblies, that will be the end. That will be the end of gender, Mr. Speaker, principle in our constitutional order. Meaning, if the county assembly of Elgeyo Marakwet elect 20 MCAs, Mr. Speaker, that are all men, there will be no nomination in 2032 because the principle that is the BBI report will only operate for 10 years. But ask yourself, Mr. Speaker, can you then provide that amendment that takes away that gender principle and still retain Article 81 of the Constitution that says at least a third? In 2032, we will have a problem. And the problem will be this amendment is sitting on what foundation, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, another example I would like to give is that, Mr. Speaker, you have, I am a bit, Mr. Speaker, disoriented because I've seen the time is running. But, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give one more example. That, Mr. Speaker, you have a provision that says there must be equity in share of positions in government and representation in constituencies. Is it then fair, Mr. Speaker, to say that responsibility is left to IEBC in Article 89 of the Constitution, but go to the schedule of the Constitution and look some of the constituencies, and for this matter, 70 of them, away, Mr. Speaker, from the discussion in the principles of Article 10 that, Mr. Speaker, it must be distributed fairly. Mr. Speaker, the same question would be asked in terms of, Mr. Speaker, the question of the provision of the ombudsman position. I saw the chair of the Legal Affairs Committee struggling, trying to justify, Mr. Speaker, that the ombudsman, yes, will be there. He will be there investigating judges. He will be there intimidating judges, Mr. Speaker. He will be there giving calls and telling judges, if you don't do this, if you don't do the other one, you will be removed. But then ask ourselves that, oh, the Constitution allows JSC to retain its power, Mr. Speaker, to investigate and interrogate judges. How will the two provisions sit together? How do you bring constitutional amendment that contradict the basic structure of the Constitution and the basic foundation of the Constitution in terms of the values and principles, Mr. Speaker? It is, Mr. Speaker, these glaring constitutional contradictions that you find in SRC provisions, Mr. Speaker, as the chair has talked about, that you find in Article 2 or 3 of the Constitution. Article 217 says, on division of revenue, Mr. Speaker, there must be equity. And you must take care of the constituencies and the counties that are, Mr. Speaker, marginalized for a long period of time. Then you bring a constitutional amendment that says you cap, Mr. Speaker, the resource they will get in terms of the per capita, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the population. Mr. Speaker, the question you ask yourself, is it fair after the effort we put, Mr. Speaker, this last year on division of revenue, that now we go back and take away those gains from counties like Lamu, from Tana River, from Wajir, from Garissa, Mr. Speaker, and we happily sit here and say these counties can lose money anyway, and we are putting that principle in the Constitution. I understand why the chair was struggling. He was struggling, Mr. Speaker, because he was saying we will leave that to interpretation. Let Parliament, when it comes, Mr. Speaker, why would we put ourselves in this kind of situation where we are amending the Constitution knowing too well that, Mr. Speaker, most of the provisions of the Constitution are assaulting the basic structure and the foundation of the Constitution. Why would we do that? So that then a few people can achieve their political objectives, Mr. Speaker, at the expense of the principles and values of the country. I submit, Mr. Speaker, that even though time is too short for me to make this, can I request 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker? Only 2.
No, just finish because it's you are
so that
I
know it's going to end in a short while. Mr. Speaker, my submission will be this: that, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution does not prohibit this House or the National Assembly to amend this bill. And whatever is not prohibited by this Constitution, and I've read Article 1 to the last article, Mr. Speaker, even to the schedule, since these provisions are not prohibited, and I want to tell Senator Orengo and all the senators who are here, Elgeyo Marakwet and the region I come from, the Rift Valley, loses nothing if, Mr. Speaker, this bill passes as it is. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not the senator of only one region. We must look at the country as a whole. I come from a region who perhaps has received their fair share of an extra constituencies, and we are happy with it. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm still unhappy with the bill. Why? Because I am a senator of Kenya. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that when Kenya is well, when all of us are well, no one should look at Murkumen and look my political disposition or where I come from and think, okay, there are certain things that we are going to lose. Mr. Speaker, I was in Yes campaign in the 2010 Constitution. I worked with people like Senator James Orengo. And, Mr. Speaker, we passed the Constitution. But the people who benefited most when the Constitution passed, including the Deputy President, were in no. Being in no, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Speaker, defending basic issues that are about this Constitution does not mean you are going to be personally at a loss. So if people are going to force on us this Constitution that it must pass by force, I want to go on record as one of the citizens of this republic to say these amendments in the BBI report, Mr. Speaker, are clawing back the gains we achieved on 2010 Constitution in terms of independence of the judiciary, in terms of principles of separation of powers, Mr. Speaker, in terms of bringing matters related to executive, Mr. Speaker, to parliament, so that you will have one constituent as a minister, Mr. Speaker, and another one that doesn't have, Mr. Speaker, creating inequality. If we really wanted to change the structure of government in this country, why didn't we go straight to parliamentary system of government? How are we going to sit the amendments we brought here for certain few members of parliament to come to become cabinet?
Okay. Your time is up. Your time is up. Your time is up. You are not on record, Senator Murkumen. Order, Senator Murkumen. Let me tell you. No, I even added you. No. Senators, as you come